Hey, quick heads up before we get rolling. If you're building something big and need a boost, papernapkinwisdom.com has a stack of free tools ready for you. Strategy, mindset, leadership, all there, totally free. You can even hit the link in bio on social media and let's level up.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govindh Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govindh Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 291. Today, we're stepping into a conversation that may just shift the way you think about prosperity and purpose. Now, imagine for a moment that you've been living in a space that feels safe, familiar, maybe even successful on the surface, and yet something inside you whispers, there's more. More meaning, more alignment, more fulfillment. Have you ever felt that? Our guest today, Jennifer McKenna, founder of JMac Consulting, business strategist, and creator of the JMac Method, has dedicated her career to guiding leaders and organizations to bridge that exact gap. She believes prosperity isn't just about results, it's about courage, faith, and a willingness to step out of the familiar. In this episode, Jennifer shares her prosperity formula, captured on a simple napkin. It's a framework that sounds simple, but unlocks a profound truth about how leaders and entrepreneurs can build lives of both success and significance. As you listen, I invite you to notice where in your own journey are you clinging to what's familiar, and what could happen if you choose faith and leaned toward fulfillment instead. This is going to be a powerful conversation. Let's dive in. Jennifer McKenna, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and completely honored that you asked me to.
Yeah, thrilled that you're here. Well, you're sitting in a very comfy chair, so I have a little bit of chair envy as you seem to be curled right into it. So I hope our listeners are curled up as well. Hopefully, if you're driving, you're not curled up. But other than that, I hope you're curled up and relaxed because I think this is going to be a great chat. Jennifer, you shared a really interesting paper napkin with me, and you called it your prosperity formula, and you've got 3 F's. One with the square around it, and that square one is on the left side. It says familiar, and it leaps over faith. And I'm sure there's something that's the second F, that's the middle F, and F with a circle around it is fulfillment on the far right. And you call that the JMac Method. Jennifer, why did you share that with me?
Well, because that has changed my life and helped transform countless clients. I don't know if I want to say lives because I can't speak for them, but they always say it is a life-changing experience to apply it. And so I thought, I don't know if it can help anybody else. I want to share it.
Okay, so how did you come upon this?
Uh, when I was young, I was very fortunate. I was a nonprofit executive in my 20s.
Wow.
And just like a lot of people that I work with, particularly, we get conditioned to be workaholics. And the way we get conditioned to do that is because we get all the accolades. It's how I got that position. It's how I got raises. It's how people get bonuses. You get all this positive reinforcement for what I now call negative behavior, which is self-abusive workaholism. And so I was diagnosed with a chronic illness in my late 20s. And I went from working, I don't know, 60, 70, 80, sometimes 90 hours a week to having a very difficult time having the energy to get out of bed and take a shower.
Mm.
And I was told I'd be on drugs the rest of my life. And I said to my doctor, okay, if you put me on drugs now, how many drugs will I be on when I'm 60? And by the way, I'm much closer to that now. And how high will my dosages be? And she said, you don't want the answer to either of those questions. You will be on a lot of pharmaceuticals, and you just don't want. And I said, then I'm going to find another way. So I started studying what was going on inside of me with my thoughts and my attitudes and my behaviors that led to it. I basically looked at myself after crying for 7 days, looked at myself in the mirror and said, well, girl, you got yourself here. How are you going to get yourself out? And um, a couple of years later, after I had been groomed to be the president and CEO of that organization, I found out I was pregnant with my firstborn. And I did a very, very controversial thing. I turned down the position. And I said, you guys gave me the autonomy to transform the organization as a vice president. I don't, I'm not striving for a title or a salary. I don't know anything about motherhood. It freaks me out. I gotta go see what this is about first. So I left the position, and at that time, I had weaned myself off the pharmaceuticals. I had gotten my energy back. I'd gotten my lifestyle back. I'd gotten married. I'd gotten all these things, right? And I didn't think when I was diagnosed that would be the case. People called me out of the blue and said, will you coach me? I saw how you led your teams. I saw what you did with the organization, and I saw what you did with your own health. And I need your help. And I kept thinking, well, I can't tell you what to do. So I had to come up with a tool. And so I created this formula because I really had to go back and figure out, what did I do? And so this is the synopsis, and I do it with the F's to try to make it memorable, so it's easy for people to apply in their own lives.
That's great. So what does familiar mean?
It is our comfort zone. It is a square because no matter where you turn, you're going to hit a dead end. And the comfort zone, as I define it, is all the all the things that go on inside of us, our thoughts and our beliefs and everything that comprise something that is familiar with our upbringing, or in our formative years, right? There's a certain dynamic. It may be terribly uncomfortable. It may even be from our worst trauma, but it is what the brain knows to be familiar, and therefore the ego protects it and wants to keep you there. And so there's a whole lot of neural activity that goes on, and then there's the mind-body connection that can cause things to go from what's familiar in your brain all the way to chronic illness, as an example. It is the thing behind our most sabotaging beliefs, behaviors, and experiences. And so it's the thing that we want to break out of.
Okay. Where's the paradox there? Because it's a thing you want to break out of, but everywhere you go, it's a dead end.
Right. That's why there's a PIN code, and that's not on the napkin. So the PIN code is how you break out. And so that is perspective, intent, and no fear.
Perspective, intent, and no fear.
No fear. So it's like you go to the ATM, you've got a PIN code, you get your money. This is the treasures you will access to get out of stocks.
So how do you use perspective to help you break out of this?
So one of the things that you'll recognize when you start looking at your comfort zone is that there's a perpetual thought that you're having that is keeping you miserable or keeping you stuck, or in my case, sick. And it's almost like we become addicted to that thought process.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what a belief is, because a belief is really nothing more than a repetitive thought. And so we think something to be true so often that we kind of just keep perpetuating it. And then we keep validating ourselves. See, that I told you. And so I have another tool called the belief cycle, and it shows that whole process. But the bottom line is, you have to question your perspective. You really have to question it, because it's what you're committed to. And the way you're looking at it is the first indicator of what's keeping you stuck. And so you want to turn your pessimism or your negativity or your just self-defeatist view of it, or maybe you just see it as a challenge. Maybe it's that simple, and you just want to turn it into an opportunity.
I love that.
Shift your perspective.
So I'm a big believer in the fact that when we change the way we look at the world we look at changes, and that's what you're saying there, right? So change the way you look at the world, and you've changed that perspective, then all of a sudden the dead ends may disappear. So where does intent play a role?
So I'm a big believer that intent is your motive. And it's also, the part of your intention, but that's different from a goal. A goal is a measurable thing we try to aspire to achieve, right? But the intention is the thing that's going to determine the quality of your experience. And we are setting intentions all day, every day with everything we do, with everything we think, but we just don't know it most of the time. So this is a call to say, purify your intention. Get really clear about what your motive is, get clear about your intent, and purify it. So what do I mean by that? It's like, well, you may have an intention to, go have a tough conversation, or do something different because you're shifting your perspective and you think, okay, I'll try this. But if you're not clear that your intent is for a win-win, or you're not clear that you really want to create a beautiful experience, then your ego could easily take over. And remember, it's the gatekeeper of your comfort zone. So it's going to convince you not to change, not to do this. And it's going to start working up intentions and motives that are not in your best interest. Wanting to be right is an intent, and that can trip us up every single time.
So I love the fact that you're turning intent into a motive, which makes it almost, the rest of the word motivation turns it into action, right? So part of it is when you change the way you look at the world changes, but the other side of it is intention turns it to action. In your case, your intent turns it to action. And I think that your no fear part of it is just encouraging people to take a step, right? Because you don't know where that's going to go, right?
Right. And I want to stress this. No fear doesn't mean that I encourage people to be fearless, because I think that is something that we can beat ourselves up for if we aren't in a moment. It means that we allow no fear to get in the way. And so it's a call to be courageous.
And a funny thing about courage, right? You got to show up before courage shows up.
You got to show up, and you have to take action, because you have to prove to yourself that you're courageous. So whether that action is internal, or you take that internal shift and you actually do take an action, but one way or the other, you've got to prove to yourself that you're willing to do something with.
So how did you use a pin code to break out of your familiar?
Oh my goodness. I had to change my beliefs from thinking that so I'm going to go back in time to my birth. I was adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got diagnosed and I had to start doing this internal search and kind of inner analysis, so to speak, that was when I really recognized that I was operating all the time from believing that I had to prove myself in order to be loved, in order to be even kept around.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that I had developed a lifetime of accommodating others. And that was where my self-worth got wrapped up. My identity was wrapped up. And then I was from the Midwest, so working hard was just a thing. And so they all got intertwined. And next thing you know, I was a workaholic, thinking that the second I stopped doing that, I had no worth.
Mm. Yeah. And no one would keep you around anymore.
No one would keep me around. And so when I got diagnosed, I literally, the whole catastrophic thing went through my head. No one will ever want to marry me.
Right.
I'm going to be broken. I'm worth nothing. And so, so that was just kind of where I had to break down my familiar, that I had to stop believing and behaving in ways that I had to prove my worth or seek validation.
So how did you, from that what sounds like a very dark and lonely place, how did you change the perspective that you held?
I let myself, and this is why in the formula, even though it doesn't show this on the napkin, you begin with the end in mind. So the circle is where you start with, you've got to have a vision for what you want, because if you don't have something you want badly enough, you won't do this.
That's right.
You won't do this. And so the fulfillment piece it implies at the end that you've fulfilled this vision, but you want to start with the end in mind because you may not know exactly how it's going to play out, but you have to create something that you want. And I wanted to get out of bed badly. I wanted my life back badly. I was ambitious. I was energetic. I loved to socialize. I lived by the work hard, play hard mentality. I loved being with my friends. I loved so many things. I wanted my life back. And I also decided that I had to acknowledge that I had abused my life, that workaholism, and that, and then after working a 90-hour week, going out and staying out till 4 a.m. with my friends drinking beer was probably not a great way to enjoy myself. I did, I was eating junk food on the run and I was doing all the things, right? And so my body just was like, listen, you've been in charge for a long time, but I'm going to take charge now, right? And so I decided that not only did I want my life back, but I really wanted to learn how to take care of it.
I
And
love
that
it.
was a really big change.
The so you do talk about this, right? And you just said it, that the fulfillment, the idea, the vision, the picture of the end in mind is the starting point.
Yeah.
And breathing hope into that is a critical part of it. How did you not only change your perspective to that fulfillment, but how did you breathe hope in it in the middle of, you said you fell in despair, you were pretty upset about
Yeah.
where you
I
were.
let myself cry. One of the things I tell, and I've been through a lot harder times in my life than that one. That was just a very pivotal one. But
So almost dying wasn't enough for you. You
well, I
needed.
wasn't almost dying then.
Okay.
That was just, I couldn't get out of bed.
Okay.
So it wasn't a terminal illness, it was a chronic illness.
Chronic illness. Sorry. Yes, you said
Yeah,
that.
no, that's okay because several years later I was diagnosed with breast cancer and I had to go through it all again. But I will say that I, you know, I really, it was a lot of reflection. And I've told people over the years, one of the things that I hope I never lose is the ability to cry
Mm,
because it releases so much of the fear and the angst and the anxiety. Um, and it allows us to cycle through our emotions instead of avoid them.
right.
Um, and I would say that if there was any other thing outside of that formula that know was my lifeline, it was my tears. It was like, and I never let anyone shame me for crying ever again.
That's great. Somebody shamed you for crying?
Oh gosh, being female in the workplace and being ambitious. I mean, it was always like you don't have long hair. I had to cut my hair and straighten it. You don't cry in the workplace. You don't do a lot of
Mm,
things. And so, as a woman, those things are very natural. And so, it's very difficult to just kind of like tamp it down when you are very naturally emotional. But you can learn how to do anything. And so I did. But after that, I decided, no, 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 I'm going to turn this on its head. And I'm going to try to help people understand that this is actually one of the most important things we can do for ourselves and our society.
yeah. So you're talking to a guy who happens to be a pretty big guy, but still a guy who would tear up at long distance telephone commercials back in the day when there was such a thing as
I
long distance
love that.
telephone. So I think I don't think anybody should ever apologize for showing emotion. And if you manage to leak a little bit of energy, you needed to. So that's not a bad thing.
Yes.
So tell me about this arrow that jumps over faith to fulfillment. What does that mean?
So that's the letting go. Right?
Okay.
We tend to want to especially you get this vision, you want something, you've got, you're all geared up, now you're getting excited and you've shifted from this dark space into this exciting space. So then next thing you know, you're wanting to force and use your will to make it happen, right? We get trained to
Right.
do that too. And this says, after you take your courageous action, let go. and let the forces that be bring something back to you to show you your next step.
So what does that look like? Because a lot of people look backward to look forward, and I find this really interesting, right? I've been really playing with this idea, and it's going to sound a little wacky, but the time doesn't really exist because the future and the present only live when we evoke them. Sorry, the future and the past only live in the present when we evoke them. So everything is in the present. So if everything's in the present, why don't we just choose the thing in the future as opposed to the past? But we don't. We bring the past into the future, and that encumbers us. I think what you're saying is a deliberate and intentional shift toward that future intention by letting go of the past. I love this idea, and but what's a constructive tool? Do you have a pin code for that too?
I don't have a pin code for that, but that's why I use the word faith, because I think people make that word synonymous with religion.
Right.
And what I try to differentiate is it's not religion. Some religions teach you how to exercise faith, but faith is your ability to trust that you don't have to force things, to trust that with good intention, courageous action, and positive perspective, that you are creating with just the power of those thought forms a great outcome. That you
Right.
can create your desired outcome with the power that you have through these steps without having to force anything.
So
And so, yeah,
I really like this because one of the things that I really gravitate toward is the idea, the notion that in fact it is it yes, you have to take epic amounts of action, but the shift in perspective and the action is really all that's required. And if you do that consistently, everything else is going to come because it's really the first step. It's about making it bad, making it better. So you take that first step and then the rest of it comes to you, but you don't have a chance unless you take that first step. And
that's right.
and one of the great quotes on faith I've ever heard from an entrepreneurial point of view is faith is taking the first step when you don't know where the second step is going.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, just take, faith is like you're looking at the staircase, just take the first step. Don't look at the whole staircase. Don't put yourself back into a fear zone, but step outside of your fear paralysis. It's just one step. And it starts within, because if you shift your perspective and you purify your intent, you get clear on your motive and you make it a very positive, pure one, that first step becomes easier. If you start there, it feels impossible. But by
Right.
the time you take your mind through these very intentional exercises, it becomes easier.
So, Jennifer, somewhere out there, somebody's going to be saying, there's a small business owner, there's a medium-sized entrepreneur, there's a leader, and they're going to say, oh, okay, well, wait a minute, Jennifer. Let me put the math together on this. Jennifer was very young. She ascended to a high-ranking executive position. Um, uh, I can't possibly do that. She's she's she had way more success and she had places to fall back on, but that's not the whole story, right? You didn't always. It wasn't, even though you overcame these great physical challenges. Business wasn't always easy either, was it?
No, and it still isn't, right? And nothing's handed to anybody. I mean, we create our reality. And so everything that we do is really about our intentionality and our accountability. And that doesn't mean that we beat ourselves up if we don't do everything or we don't do everything right. It just means that we accept the fact that we create our own reality. And so if we're not having one that we aren't enjoying, then it's just a little indicator that there's something inside of us that probably needs to be shifted.
And
And
let go. Like you truly have to let go of the past.
you truly have to let go. Now, you can step back there for a second to reflect and take a bit of wisdom, bring that with you. And there's an African word for that called Sankofa, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, Sankofa. But it means like step back, get what you need, move on. And I think that if we only use the past for that purpose, it would suit us extremely well, because otherwise we get sucked into the quicksand of resentment and grief and remorse and guilt and shame and blame. And then it's quicksand. You're going to go down fast and you're going to have a really hard time getting out.
Right. And I fundamentally believe that we all have an opportunity to learn from the past without carrying the negative and especially undue negative emotion into the future. And we all likewise have the ability to let the future inform our present, right?
Yeah.
Realign ourselves in the direction of what we really want in the world. And this is what you're talking about, letting go of those negative emotions and leaning into the positive ones that are in front of you.
Yeah.
So, what are some common pitfalls that people fall into in adopting your prosperity formula? Where do people get stuck?
Well, a lot of people that use it have, uh, we're in a coaching relationship. So if they get stuck, very quickly will say, "Hey, I keep looping in this thing." And so it's never, what I'm saying to you is, it's never about the circumstances, right? Everyone thinks that they're getting stuck in their circumstances. And what it's about is you're looping through your old beliefs.
Mm,
You're getting stuck in your old beliefs, and the circumstances are showing you that. So even though I created this methodology and I've been using it for 23 years in my own life and in the lives of hundreds of clients, I can say this: life never stops challenging me. It never stops challenging any of us. It's The difference is that you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and you start looking at the circumstances and say, "Oh, what are you showing me?" Because
mhm.
if I'm creating something that I don't like, then what have I been thinking about lately? What have I adopted as a new belief that's a negative one, a disempowered one, a judgmental one, that now this has come back to show me that. And it's a wake up call. So then you know your power, you shift, you take the steps, and you're on your merry way again.
Right.
So that's, I mean, it's the same thing for most people. In the beginning, however, sometimes the biggest issue where people get stuck is not knowing what they want. So they have a hard time getting started because they don't know how to envision something. They only know their pain point, and so they only know that they just want that to stop. So people get stuck differently from the beginning than they do once they get going with it.
And there's something really powerful about not pushing away from the thing that you don't want, but actually walking towards, jumping towards the thing that you want. And there is
Yeah,
power in that, isn't there?
very much so.
Right?
Very
Because
much so.
because because even just think about it. Psychologically, what happens is people say, "Oh, I want to lose 20 pounds." So what happens is they go out there and do some things and they lose a little bit of weight, they lose a little bit more weight, and then by the end of January, February, they're about 8 or 9 pounds into it. They're doing pretty well, and somebody invites them to a cocktail party, and they pick up the champagne and chips, and they're back again. Moving away from the target is different than saying, I want to be here. That's my goal. I want to, you said a weight target, whatever that is, and that's the goal you're going toward. Then you're picking up steam as you go toward it, as opposed to losing steam as you move away from the thing that you'd given power to.
Yes. So let's look at that specific example, because I love that, and a lot of people do that, right? We still see a lot of advertising around lose weight, lose weight, lose weight. Lose in and of itself has a negative connotation, right? You're not gaining anything. You're not winning. Right? You're losing something. So it automatically is starting you off with a deficit thought pattern.
Right.
Okay. But if you create a vision of seeing yourself in a dress or a tuxedo or something that you just look incredibly sharp in, that can be your vision. Your intention then can be, I intend to um, to feel and look my very best. And I may not know what that is yet, but I know I'm going to know it when I get there. And now I'm going to start on the path to that. And I say it that way because when I was going through the breast cancer thing, I had a lot of complications. I had a bilateral mastectomy, and so in that beginning, there were just some other things that were happening with my health. But I remember thinking, okay, well, and I was self-employed, so everything crashed, right? I was financially, emotionally, and physically depleted. And I had two small children and a father that was extremely handicapped. I was the secondary caretaker. He was 4 states away. The plot thickens. It was very difficult, very, very difficult time. And so I remember at one point thinking, well, now I know what it's like to be my weakest. I want to know what it's like to be my strongest. And I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that I really wanted to know what it was like. And so when I got past that, I joined a gym for the first time at 47. And next thing I know, within like 2 years or whatever, I was like doing like big strength training. So in other words, I became the healthiest, strongest I had ever been in my life by the time I was 50. And when you look at my past and my health, no one would have seen that coming. So if I had focused on my deficits and said something like, I I just want to not feel like this anymore, you know, instead of I really want to see what it's like to be my strongest.
Right.
And then just be patient enough for the process. Love yourself through the healing. Love yourself through the journey. And it's extraordinary what you can do over time.
Right.
That kind of a mindset.
So does that mean that you didn't, I mean, first of all, I'm so happy to hear that you're healthy. I'm so
Yeah.
happy to hear that you're happy and strong and kicking ass. What I'm curious about is, are you in your formula, in your prosperity formula, in your method, and in your own life? What happens in those moments where momentum isn't as easy as
Yeah.
other days? Because I know that that you're not just wiping a big brush over everything and saying, oh, I just had this idea that I was going to be my healthiest, and look at what I just zenned on it, and I materialized this badass power lifter. That's not what happened.
No, no. Um, we get conditioned through multiple sources, whether it be advertising, smartphones, the internet, whatever it is. We get conditioned toward instant gratification. And with that conditioning comes a false expectation of what it truly is to be happy, healthy, and to thrive, which is prospering, right?
Right.
And so it's really about understanding that this is a journey, dare I be so cliche, and that it is imperative to celebrate the tiny little triumphant moments.
Yeah.
I got out of bed today. Right? For someone
Right.
who has been either chronically ill or chronically depressed, that's an enormous victory.
Right.
So you may not have the bikini body and the, whatever it is you're longing for, the, Caribbean vacation on somebody's yacht, who knows what, maybe your own yacht. I don't know. I don't know what everybody's wanting out there, but you may not be to that full extended vision. But my goodness, what a huge triumph. What a huge triumph if you actually have a tough conversation with someone that you've been avoiding for months.
Mm-hmm.
What a huge triumph. What a huge triumph if you're in line at the grocery store and you're late to go pick up your child. And instead of snapping at the person in front of you, who's an elderly person who's taking their time getting their food on the line, and you didn't snap at them. When you're just like, you're thinking your kids, you got to get to your kids and you got to get this thing and and it's easy to snap, right? What if you didn't? What if you took a deep breath and you helped that person through the grocery line instead? That's a triumphant moment. Like,
Right.
that's a triumphant moment because you overcame a very real and real easy temptation to slip into that other space inside yourself.
I love that.
It's little victories all day, every day, but we tend to skip over those, minimize those, think that's cheesy to even think about or celebrate. No, that is incremental progress. And if we don't celebrate it, we won't get to the bigger places.
Right. And I think that this is a big deal, right? That a lot of people just don't appreciate. Some people will be pushing away from something so passionately that they don't see the win in those little moments, especially the ones that are hard earned, especially the ones that are uncommon and uncomfortable conversations, like, you know, might sound easy to someone not to lose their cool in that kind of situation, but I know how much stress it causes my kids if I'm not there and they're the last ones on the curb waiting to be picked up. And um especially with my daughter, it can be a sheer sense of panic that comes over
Yeah.
her.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
Thankfully, that's evolved for her.
Yeah.
It's not the case anymore, but that used to be a very panicky situation. So, yeah, that was a very real pressure. So celebrating that you could bring kindness in a situation where you're not feeling your best,
Yes.
that's pretty huge.
It's huge. It is huge and should never be overlooked. And likewise, for the person behind that person, and let's say she did lose it. What about the person behind that person, instead of judging her, saying, "Are you okay?"
Right.
Right? And we live in a world where our younger generation is struggling with mental health because it's almost like they're just not allowed to be human.
Hmm.
Um, Anything could go viral. One bad move can make somebody canceled, whatever we want to say, however we want to say it. And the one thing that we should all be allowed to do is feel.
Yeah, and you said that earlier, right? That you're unapologetically a feeling person.
Mhm.
Those weren't your words, but that's what I got from it.
Yeah.
So let me ask one more time. Let's say someone's in the box of the familiar,
Yeah.
seeing nothing but dead ends,
Yeah.
nothing but no way out, which
Yeah.
is what what your model suggests. Where do they start to look for the vision?
Mhm. Um, if you can't access a bigger vision that motivates you toward different thoughts and different actions, then you start small. And you can, there's several things you can do actually. One is I encourage people a lot to find a creative project. Doesn't matter what
Mm,
it is. Absolutely doesn't matter what it is. When you There are two feelings that you want to pursue. One is joy and one is gratitude. And when you pursue those, if you grab for something that you can be thankful for, that oftentimes can get you unlocked from your negativity, right? But if you're really stuck, I encourage creative projects. Just walk away from your thought process, walk away from the situation, walk away from all of it completely, and find something to dive into, because and hopefully it gives you tremendous joy doing so. When we access our creative faculties, we lose ourselves. So you stop those processes in their tracks, and you give your brain somewhere else completely unrelated to go to,
right.
and it just helps you to reset. Just reset. And then bring your vision down to smarter incremental, or not smarter, smaller incremental goals. You know what? I just want to have a really good meal. Just want to have a really good meal today.
And it could be, I want to smile at a stranger. I want
Yes,
to,
yes.
I want to help someone across the road. It can be absolutely anything. And I fundamentally believe the best way to get momentum is to give it away. And, what I think is really amazing about your story is that you've obviously had more than a few challenges and how you've paid forward and given away that momentum to your community around you, the people around you, and I really I'm very grateful to have heard that from you today.
Well, true to form, you're about to make me cry. So thank you for that. I have a tear for every emotion, even gratitude and
That's good.
humility, because what you said is very humbling, and it also because it conjures up a lot. I chose. This is very difficult for me to say. Sorry. I chose to stay the course of my career for that reason,
Right.
and it was very difficult, more times than I can count. Because I could have easily plugged in somewhere and been an executive and made a really comfortable salary.
Right.
But by the way, I went through divorce, so I'm the single mom of, great ex-husband. We're great friends. I want to make sure I don't put any bad energy out there toward him because we're fabulous friends. But I was on my own, so to speak, during those really tough years. And the thing that carried me through was every client that told me this was life-changing.
Right.
I have a jar over here in my office that just says "Thank you, JMac," and it's filled from one of the businesses because I also do this in businesses. So I will help with whole cultures, and their whole team wrote handwritten, and it means the world to me. And so if I hadn't had the amazing experience of being with so many people through their own tough challenges, I would have never, I don't think I would have made it through my own. I stayed the course of this career for that reason, and it was very hard on many occasions.
The fundamental belief that we are our best for the world when we are for others what we need ourselves.
Yeah.
And you are the help you needed for everyone around you. And I think that's your gift. At this stage, and it sounds ridiculous to say this. First of all, never apologize for sharing emotion. I said that earlier on. I believe it
Yeah.
firmly. It's a sign of strength, nothing else in my world.
Thank
But
you.
at this part of the show, we always do a hat tip to a former Paper Napkin Wisdom contributor. His name is John Rulin. He passed away last year suddenly and tragically. But 11 years ago, he shared with us a napkin, which was "What you appreciate appreciates." And in that napkin and following that napkin, he wrote a book called Giftology, Change the World with a Mission of Gratitude, and people showing and sharing gratitude, making real connections of appreciation with one another and really loving on each other. And I really, so as a paying forward the gift that he gave us and he gave to the world, we ask all our guests to spread some appreciation or some gratitude in the world by shouting out someone or some people for whatever comes to your heart. So, is there anyone you'd like to shout out today with some appreciation?
Yes. I mean, my kids are the obvious choice, so I'm not going to go with the obvious choice. I want to shout out to my dear friend, Dorothy Leone Glasser, who has been through much harder than I have in her own life, who has been my dear soul sister for 30 plus years, who has held my hand, ooh, through every hardship. Um, she's just been a rock in my life for so long. I can't remember life without her. Um, so if anyone wants to look up her work, she does patient advocacy. She's an extraordinary human being.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
What a powerful conversation with Jennifer McKenna. I'm deeply grateful for the way she shared her prosperity formula with us. Familiar, faith, fulfillment, simple, yet so transformative. Let's pause and reflect on the wisdom Jennifer left with us today. The familiar feels safe, but it can also set us back and hold us back. Faith is the bridge, not blind hope, but an intentional step forward. Fulfillment is about alignment, meaning, and prosperity that goes beyond material success. Prosperity requires courage, a willingness to step into the unknown. And when we practice this formula, we discover prosperity is a way of being, not just a destination. Now, imagine what becomes possible when you move beyond the familiar. Imagine who you could become if you trusted in the process. And imagine the fulfillment that's waiting for you when you take that leap of faith. If this conversation resonated with you, make sure you subscribe to Paper Napkin Wisdom wherever you listen to podcasts. Share this episode with someone who's ready to move past the familiar, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps bring more voices and wisdom into this community. And here's my challenge for you today. Grab a napkin, write down one area of your life or business where you're stuck in the familiar and the step of faith you need to move toward fulfillment. Post it with the hashtag Paper Napkin Wisdom so that we can celebrate your courage together. Remember, big results come from small, simple shifts. Prosperity isn't just about success, it's about fulfillment. Take the wisdom Jennifer shared today, apply it, and watch how it transforms your path forward. Make it a great day.